Hi everyone, I'm alcoholic. My name is Joanne.
Hey Joanne.
Welcome to the Big Book Study Workshop. We will be keeping everyone muted for the duration of this workshop, with the exception of the facilitators, which are Tony.R, Joe C, and myself, Joanne. This is not a conventional AA meeting where we share our experience, strength, and hope with each other. This is a Big Book Study Workshop, the purpose of which is to take members of AA through the program of recovery as it's laid out in our basic text, Alcoholics Anonymous, or more commonly known as the Big Book. We will not be referencing any other literature or versions of the 12 steps. Our aim is to help educate and challenge our beliefs about the program of recovery, so we might sift through some of the inaccuracies that circulate within our fellowship. In other words, if you can't reconcile a belief or principle in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it isn't AA. Please feel free to ask questions in the Zoom chat feature. We will try to answer them periodically if they're relevant. Anyone behaving inappropriately or in an abusive manner will be removed from the workshop and you won't be permitted back in. That's it. Tony, you want to take it from there?
We're done. Joe, why don't you start us off with that we kind of agreed to kind of get us set in the right mindset. We all kind of agreed that we're going to look at this as those, the facilitators of having gone through this, and those that are new of just being introduced to this. So if you can keep an open mind and kind of go through this, and there's an excellent prayer that we've adopted just for this meeting to kind of, set the tone for this meeting. And what do we call that, Joe? Did I wake you up, Joe? You all right? Is he muted?
There we go. How you doing?
So did you want me to repeat all that, or were you paying attention?
Yeah, no, we were paying attention.
Okay, good. I thought it was like our normal phone calls there for a second.
Thanks, Tony. This is the set-aside prayer, and this is how we're going to open it up so you can have a new experience and a new attitude towards what we're trying to present to you tonight, okay? And it goes, Dear God, please set aside everything I think I know about myself, this book, my disease, these steps, and especially about you, dear God, so that I might have an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please help me to see the truth. That's it.
We're done.
Thanks, Joe.
That's pretty good. And what's your sobriety date, Joe?
October 29th, 2017.
Joanne?
August 24th, 2014.
Good. I'm a recovered alcoholic. My name's Tony. Sobriety date is April 8, 1989. Not my first introduction to AA, but it was my first introduction to the program of recovery as outlined in here that we'll go through tonight. So we're going to hit some highlights, and then, but before we do that, we have last week's talk available. You can kind of text if you're looking for it, and Joe will direct you how to get a hold of that talk we had on Tuesday. And what we try to do is the format of exactly what the book entails in working with others. So after having gone through this experience, you would have had experienced a psychic change or spiritual experience through a course of action. And so after that, they ask us to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles. And the part of the ideas that they outline in doing that and what we incorporate in working with others, and most people, if not everybody who's been through this, should incorporate this chapter in their life when guiding somebody else through that. So this is what we use as a guide. So to show you that we're not just, pulling something out of the air of the format that we use. Joel, you want to go through that with us? Or did you want to read that, Joanne, and Joel explain it?
Which part are we at?
Page 94.
We're still on 94.
To 95, yeah.
You want me to go outline the program?
Sure.
Outline the program of action, explaining how you made a self-appraisal, how you straightened out your past, and why you are now endeavoring to be helpful to him. It is important for him to realize that your attempt to pass this on to him plays a vital part in your own recovery. Actually, he may be helping you more than you are helping him. Make it plain he is under no obligation to you, that you hope only that he will try to help other alcoholics when he escapes his own difficulties. Suggest how important it is that he place the welfare of other people ahead of his own.
And that's what we're doing here today, trying to do this very thing that they're talking about here, right? Sorry, go ahead.
No problem. Make it clear that he is not under pressure, that he needn't see you again if he doesn't want to. You should not be offended if he wants to call it off. for he has helped you more than you have helped him. If your talk has been sane, quiet, and full of human understanding, you have perhaps made a friend. Maybe you have disturbed him about the question of alcoholism. This is all to the good. The more hopeless he feels, the better. He will be more likely to follow your suggestions.
And when we go through this, it'll make more sense to you as we go through it when we explain it, right? Alcoholism, then that should motivate you through looking for a solution, right? So we'll get into this stuff. We're just giving you the outline of what we're doing in case you're asking, what are these guys doing? Well, this is what we're doing, okay?
Your candidate may give reasons why he need not follow all the program.
Anybody familiar with that? Sorry.
Nobody guilty of that.
Nobody guilty of that here. Let's not be drastic here. Easy, easy.
He may rebel at the thought of a drastic house cleaning, which requires discussion with other people. Do not contradict such views. Tell him you once felt as he does. But you doubt whether you would have made such much progress had you not taken action. On your first visit, tell him about the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous.
So just for a second there, we see how important that is, the difference, distinction between the program of Alcoholics Anonymous outlined in this book and the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. They're two different things. That's why we read how it works. We also read that other piece of literature. What do we call that, Joe? I forget. What do we call that in meetings? Are you there, Joe? He's muted again.
Is he?
Joe.
I don't know if you're saying Joanne or Joe.
Joe, same thing, talking like same thing. So, Joe, what's that other piece of literature we read at meetings that outline the difference between the two?
The blue card.
Or how about the preamble?
Yeah, we got the blue card, the preamble, but the blue card, it states, the preamble is about Alcoholics Anonymous, men and women, show other people how we've recovered, and then the blue card reads, and it's funny because not a lot of people understand the difference. There's the open meeting and then there's the closed meeting. In the open meeting, we talk about our problems with the drink. In the closed meeting, we're not talking about problems with the drink because that's no longer the problem anymore. We're talking more solution-based, and that's why 94 is so important here, because we're outlining the program of action right now. We're not discussing no more of the drink problem. That's secondary.
So
in a more contemporary sense, like in a present-day sense, how this sort of relates to what we experience in our fellowship today, just to put it plainly, is you can be a member of this fellowship and still be dying of alcoholism.
Anybody want to do a show of hands on that one? Right? How many people have been there before they got 12-stepped into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, right?
And what being a member of the fellowship looks like is you're attending meetings, you're going for coffee with other people in the fellowship, you're engaging in conversation, but nothing internally has really changed. Nothing sufficient enough to bring about recovery from alcoholism, which is why so many people are baffled when they go to 90 meetings in 90 days and celebrate on the 90th day with a drink. So,
and also what they're saying here, when you're working with somebody, as we're going through here, a lot of people are going to be balking, thinking, and kind of based on their own experience thus far, they've been able to keep themselves sober. They don't see the need to do this because they don't really understand alcoholism. So they're saying this guy here, or this person, or the individual, the prospect, is saying, well, I don't really see the need to do this, but you've kind of diagnosed this person as maybe having a problem. So you say, well, hey, we have a fellowship of men and women who don't drink, and maybe you could get support there. Tell them about the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and hopefully when they go there, they could hear more about the symptoms of alcoholism, get more identification, and maybe see the need of needing to do this thing in order to recreate their lives. I think that's the big part of what they're saying here, because they've already made the distinction. They don't want the program. So here, let me tell you about the fellowship, because remember what we read when we started this thing, that the alcoholic's very ill, right? So the only person that don't know they're ill is the person that's ill. I don't know if anybody's been there. How many people have been talked to in this group, or people here showing hands that people are talking to you about, your alcoholism or your condition, and you're wondering what their problem is. You're consoling them. They're like, I'm really concerned for you, and you're concerned that they're concerned, right? Like, why would you be concerned for me? Anybody been there? Okay, go ahead, keep reading.
On your first visit, tell him about the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. If he shows interest, lend him a copy of this book. Unless your friend wants to talk further about himself, do not wear out your welcome, Tony.
Yeah, you're already here. Once you're here, you give me permission to work with you,
Yeah.
right? I don't need to ask permission. If somebody's in a meeting, you work with them. Okay, go ahead.
Give him a chance to think it over. If you do stay, let him steer the conversation in any direction he likes. Sometimes a new man is anxious to proceed at once, and you may be tempted to let him do so. This is sometimes a mistake. If he has trouble later, he is likely to say you rushed him. You will be most successful with alcoholics if you do not exhibit any passion for crusade or reform. Never talk down.
Oh, we like to do that, eh? We're all reformers after we get a little something, right? And we start on our family, don't we? All those poor people.
There comes the next bit of advice.
Okay.
Never talk down to an alcoholic from any moral or spiritual hilltop. Simply lay out the kit of spiritual tools for his inspection. Show him how they work with you. Offer him friendship and fellowship. Tell him that if he wants to get well, you will do anything to help.
And that's what we're doing here today. We're sharing our experience, strength, and hope through the book, what got us here, what has us here, and the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous working in our lives and letting people know it's available to anybody willing to go through this, and we'll walk with you. That's what this is about, right? We'll guide you through this thing, right? It doesn't have to be a problem. Okay, go ahead.
You will be most successful with alcoholics if you do not exhibit any passion for crusade or reform. Sorry, never talk down to an alcoholic. Show him how they worked with you. Offer him friendship and fellowship. Tell him that if he wants to get well, you will do anything to help. If he is not interested in your solution, if he expects you to act only as a banker for his financial difficulties or a nurse for his sprees, you may have to drop him until he changes his mind. This he may do after he gets hurt some more. If he is sincerely interested and wants to see you again, ask him to read this book in the interval. After doing that, he must decide for himself whether he wants to go on. He should not be pushed or prodded by you, his wife, or his friends.
Frothy emotional appeal.
Well, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
If he is to find God, the desire must come from within.
So what this is really interesting, where they say, lend them a copy of your book and ask them to go through it. Most members in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous haven't even read the book. I was 11 years in and out and I never read the book. I didn't even know the program of recovery was in here. I don't know if anybody else was under the same impression. I don't know. But when somebody took me through this thing and explained it, my life has never been the same. So let's go right back. Want to do the highlights and then we'll get into this thing?
Sure, that sounds great.
So Joe, what do we got here on the first page, Alcoholics Anonymous, that we covered last week? What did you get out of that page? What would you say, a brief introduction of what you took from that information? Joe.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. From last week when we got into a bit of the doctor's opinion, did we not?
No. Okay. So I'll go through. Joe, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have this page here, right? That we got introduced to last week. The first page.
Yeah.
What did you get from that? What would you take from that? We're going to do a short review to get us caught up to where we are, right? What did you take from that? What would you say is the important parts?
Well, the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. Coming in new, you'd think recovered, would be an interesting thought. But the most important part of that paragraph is the story of. Because the story of what I got before coming in is the story of 100% guaranteed relapse. So I'm interested, obviously, in a different story. I don't know how to get it. And with that humility, if one chose that humility, I would be looking for a different story, right?
Yeah, right on.
That's kind of what we got into last week.
Yeah, Joan, out of the preface, we got that. We covered that last week, right? What would you say some of the highlights you took from that?
I think some of the most important bit of information that the preface has to offer is establishing what type of book we're actually reading, that it's a basic text, and that it contains the outline of our program of recovery.
And that's in the second paragraph, eh?
That's right. Actually, just read this paragraph real quick. Because this book has become the basic text for our society and has helped such large numbers of alcoholic men and women to recovery, there exists strong sentiment against any radical changes being made in it. Therefore, the first portion of this volume, describing the AA recovery program, has been left largely untouched in the course of revisions made for the second, third, and fourth editions. So they're establishing that it's a basic text that outlines our program of recovery.
Right on. And so where would you find the basic program of recovery?
In the first portion of this volume.
Awesome. What great information. So we got forward to the first edition. Right in our books, we've covered this last week. We're going to hit some highlights. Joe, why don't you start us off? And then Joanne, why don't you continue on some of the points that you guys would take from that as a person reading it? What were some of the highlights they're hoping you would have kind of retained in moving forward?
So if everybody goes to the forward of the first edition, how it starts off is we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. For them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. We think this account of our experience will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic. Many do not comprehend that the alcoholic is a very sick person. And besides, we are sure that our way of living has its advantages for all.
So, what was some of the highlights you got from that last week, Joe?
Well, some of the highlights.
Yeah, there we go.
It's saying exactly whose book this is. It's saying that we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women. So it's entailing that the collective understanding of what they did is over 100 of them in this book. And that's a pretty powerful statement that in itself. It's just not by one man. It's over 100 of them. And what they did is they recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. I don't know what that is at this point, but I'm a little intrigued because I myself was suffering from something such as that, right? And then the main purpose of this book is to show me how they recovered. So I'm a little bit more entailed to be like, okay, how? And then it goes on to say, well, we hope that these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication. It's pretty much saying, like, look no further. If you've been suffering from this seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, this condition that you're aware of because you're in this book, and you're looking at it, and you're seeing that the main purpose of it is to recover, and they're saying that you don't need to look no further. We're hoping that it proves so convincing. That kind of got my attention the first time it was shown to me, right? So, and then it really hints to that the alcoholic is a very sick person. After 30 days, we don't think we're sick anymore, right? And that's been my story 15 years in and out. So
yeah, because if you don't understand alcoholism, how would you know how to identify the mistake of feeling better for getting better? What did you grab out of that, Joanne?
I think probably one of the most important pieces of information in this paragraph is establishing whose experience we're about to study here. Many of us in the fellowship today approach the big book, other bits of AA literature, and other people's experience as if we're supposed to interpret it for ourselves. And that's not what they're saying. They're saying this account of our experience. You mean
we don't have that? We don't have that slogan? Figure it out.
No.
Oh.
No, we don't. That's not a slogan. That's not a thing.
Okay, I thought it
was. So from this point forward in this book, all of the contributors to this book, what you as the reader are trying to grasp is their experience. What is their experience with the information you're about to go through? Because as we get further into the basic text, the whole idea is to have the same result that they had. Is to obtain the same result. It's not to obtain our own version or our own perception or our own ideas. Those have gotten us nowhere so far. So I think that's a really important part of this paragraph.
You know, and what I got from what you guys were saying and what I picked up on this is also they're going to start new language and new ideas, and they're starting to base that conversation off by a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, right? And so in the worksheets on the second page where it talks about whose understanding, right, are we trying to get? It talks about whose understanding are we trying to get? well, whose understanding are we trying to get? We just kind of clarified it there. Our own understanding of this thing or their understanding?
We're trying to get their understanding.
And then of what? See, on the worksheets here, that says that a lot of people miss that. So we're trying to get their understanding of what? What do you say, Joe?
The problem, right? Because they're initiating that there is a problem. They're saying that seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Okay, now they're going to show us a solution. And then they're going to show us what the course of action is, because they're alluding to, we're sure our way of living has its advantages for all.
So how well do you think you'd do if you understood what the problem was based on what they were presenting, the solution based on what they were presenting, and did their course of action? What would you think the recovery rate in your life would look like? Under rarely have we seen a person fail?
Oh, it'd be phenomenal.
It'd be phenomenal. So moving along here, in Roman numeral, where they talk about, this is probably, we're going to hit a lot of other things, that people talk about, where a lot of speakers, a lot of people go, the recovery rate back when it started was 75%, and they kind of, what's a nice way of saying it? They kind of say, we're not doing our job anymore, right? And AA is really falling apart and blah, blah, blah. They're really discrediting what's happening in the fellowship today. Well, the success rate today is the same as it was back then. And a lot of people get offended by that. So what do you mean? And right away they close their mind to the idea because they have preconceived ideas on something they heard or something they read. So if you just got this book in the mail or were just introduced to it and you had no other influence whatsoever, and you were kind of read Roman numeral XX, and they talk about why the fellowship of AA grew the way it did and the success rate of it and the numbers that they talk about, they're very specific. And it's the same today of all those coming to the fellowship of AA. The recovery rate's the same, and a lot of people would argue that. Well, let's see what it says, and then we'll kind of hit that point and move on. What do you say? You give us a good read there, Joanne.
So on page XX, in the foreword to the second edition, it says, of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried, 50% got sober at once and remained that way. 25% sobered up after some relapses, and among the remainder, those who stayed on with AA showed improvement. Other thousands came to a few AA meetings and at first decided they didn't want the program, but great numbers of these, about 2 out of 3, began to return as time passed.
And that would be the same today. A lot of people come into the fellowship not understanding alcoholism, thinking, I'll just go to treatment or just go to meetings, or my humiliating experience will keep me sober. There's no way I'm ever going to drink again. You don't understand alcoholism. I never want to drink. The obsession is left. Look, the miracle has happened. You don't understand alcoholism. So when they talk about, it didn't say all the people that came to AA, it says of the alcoholics who came to AA and really tried. So that kind of breaks off a group of people who come here and really try. And you hear that today in the fellowship. There's a lot of people who go to meetings, then you see these people who are on fire about the big book or getting 12 steps through it, and they're the big book thumpers. They're the problems in some meetings, which is kind of funny. I found that in early sobriety when I got fired up with this thing. It was kind of like, wow, isn't this like phenomenal stuff that's in here? Not everybody's really thrilled with the idea of listening or hearing people who's gone through the program of recovery. I don't know. That's kind of been my story. And my story is of those who really tried. So now, my last relapse, well in and out, when I got introduced to this 30 years ago, and really tried the application through the experience of another member. I've undergone a daily reprieve. You hear people say, I've never found it necessary to take a drink. Well, I don't keep myself sober. That's beyond my pay grade. I can't stay sober under any and all conditions because I don't have that problem of having to stay sober. Does that kind of make sense? So we talk about later that the problem is removed. It doesn't exist for me. I don't treat alcoholism. I have a treatment for alcoholism. So do you guys want to add anything to that? Or?
No, I think we're good. Move on. Joe?
Yeah, no, we're good.
Good. Okay, so we need to find out what they're talking about by a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. I don't have that lingo yet, and the recovery that they put into their lives. So into the doctor's opinion, we're kind of at Roman numeral XX.
Tony, can we throw a little question out there just to see where everybody's at? for those who want to take a guess, you want to put in the chats what you think a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body is and what they mean by that? Go ahead, and then I'll review it. We'll keep going from there.
Which is it. So if we're just starting with the kind of the book, right? So a lot of people go for what they're teaching. If we're looking for a new experience here, so in the doctor's opinion, we kind of Roman numeral 25, that's XXV, and we're at XXV1, which is Roman numeral 29. Joanne, why don't you hit some highlights there to bring us up where we're at?
XXV1?
Yeah, well, starting from the doctor's opinion, like the introduction, hit some highlights to bring us up to where we're at, and we'll get Joe to hit some highlights of what you take from this, what you got out of it, like some key points, right? And people who are just joining us can go back through it on their own and get caught up, but we're just trying to bring people up to what we've covered and where we're going.
Yeah. Okay, so the doctor's opinion and what stands to reason would start to begin to our introduction or the explanation into what they mean by a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And I think the book would hold less depth and weight if they suddenly started trying to describe that to us themselves. But they made the very intelligent decision of putting a doctor's opinion first ahead of their own. And not just any doctor. So I'll read this intro and we'll find out who this doctor is and why we would care about what it is that he has to say. We of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the reader will be interested in the medical estimate of the plan of recovery described in this book. Convincing testimony must surely come from medical men who have had experience with the sufferings of our members and have witnessed our return to health. A well-known doctor, chief physician at a nationally prominent hospital specializing in alcoholic and drug addiction, gave Alcoholics Anonymous this letter. So this preamble is important, right, to let us know who this guy is and why his opinion would matter to people who might be suffering from a similar problem. And he goes on to say in late 1934, he had attended a patient who, though had been a competent businessman of good earning capacity, was an alcoholic of a type I had come to regard as hopeless. There's that word again. In the course of his third treatment, he acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. As part of his rehabilitation, he commenced to present his conceptions to other alcoholics, impressing upon them that they must do likewise with still others. This has become the basis of a rapidly growing fellowship of these men and their families. This man, and over 100 others, appear to have recovered. I personally know scores of cases who were of the type with whom other methods had failed completely. These facts appear to be of extreme medical importance because of the extraordinary possibilities of rapid growth inherent within this group. They go on to elaborate after on the following page about the first symptoms that he observes. Do you want to jump in there, Tony?
Or Joe, why don't you pick it up from there?
With the physician at our request?
Yeah, we don't have to kind of read it all. We just have to hit the highlights because we already covered it to get us kind of where we're at, right?
Well, this is the page where he begins describing the allergy for the first time, right?
Yeah, everybody, we're on XXVI, and we'll hit it up a little bit. So the doctor gave him that letter that was on the previous page. He ends it on the top of that page. He also goes in to say that these men have found a remedy for thousands of such situations. You may rely absolutely on anything they say about themselves. He's alluding to the first 100 men and women and Bill and Bob put this together collectively, right? And then they talk about that letter in this statement. It says, if you go down to the fourth line, in this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. It did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we're a little maladjusted in life, that we're in full fight from reality. We're outright mental defective.
We're the only people that argue that. Everybody around us says, yeah, that's it, that's them, yeah. We're quite offended by the whole idea, right?
Right? These things were true to some extent, in fact, to a considerable extent, with some of us. But we are sure, and this is important here, we are sure that our bodies were sickened as well. In our belief, any picture of the alcoholic which leaves out the physical factor is incomplete. And what I love about that, it's alluding to what he's about to get into now, is this allergy of the body. Is once I take a drink in any form whatsoever, I can never safely drink. You ever make a statement where, oh, honey, I'm going to have a couple of drinks tonight, and you end up drinking the fridge, right? You throw away the cork, and there you go. Or you throw away the bottle cap, and there you go. And so if the individual, the alcoholic at this point, and this is the whole seemingly hopeless state of the body part, if you don't believe you have this allergy, then you only fool yourself, because it's saying it right there as nice as they can. It says, any that leaves out this factor is incomplete, right? So it's a very important statement. So you, in your own personal story, your own experience, will have to go back and look at, do I exhibit this allergy that we're going to start discussing?
So when we read earlier, and you guys covered it, where they talked about a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body to the introduction of this thing, who put it together, this would be the first symptom in the seemingly hopeless of the physical factor of our illness, which would be the first symptom in alcoholism. Because if somebody didn't have the allergy, would it matter if they had a drink?
No.
So you need to define that. A lot of people think, oh, my alcoholic thing, I do this because I'm alcoholic. I do that because we hear that terminology. I did this crazy thing or that crazy thing. They mix up the human behavior with alcoholism, which is two different things altogether. How many 12-step fellowships are out there?
Hundreds.
So they all exhibit different problems to the human condition, or different solutions that they apply to the human condition, right? So when they get down,
the easiest way to and what we probably want to stick with, if you're very new to this thing in the beginning, is to stick with this very first symptom that they're trying to describe, because it's what sets us apart as a distinct entity. You may be experiencing many consequences, many problems that are attributed to just being a human being. But there are only two symptoms of alcoholism. And the first one that they're trying to explain to us here is the physical part of it. And they explain it in one paragraph very well, a couple pages over on page XXX. It's the second to last paragraph. It says, all these and many others have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. This phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy, which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been, by any treatment with which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence.
So we're going to back up.
The question needs to be, what sets us apart as a distinct entity?
So we're going to back up where we're at, and we're going to get into that shortly, right? We're not quite there yet. Where we're at is on page where they talk about
XXVI.
Triple I, right? They talk about, why don't we start with the frothy emotional appeal, where we kind of left off last week? And they're going to finish off about the body, and then they're going to start introducing this thing that happens in our mind. And that's why this frothy emotional appeal, they talked about maladjusted full flight from reality. They're alluding to the fact there's something not quite right in the way we process thinking in regards to the first drink. There's something fundamentally wrong with us that they're starting off here. Even though we're trying to appeal to it, there's something different here happening, right? So why don't we start, we believe. Why don't you hit us off there, Joanne?
So page XXV, III, second paragraph. We believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, and the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker.
So,
these allergic types.
Yep. Sorry. So when does the phenomenon of craving happen?
After you take a drink.
Okay, not before.
No.
Okay.
So just to be clear, the physical craving of alcohol occurs after you take the first drink, not before. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. And once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve.
Yeah, that paragraph there is just jam-packed with beautiful facts. And in the right where it says, having formed the habit, and you get a lot of people with the misconception or different understanding is like, well, back in the day I was able to control it. And that may be true for some people, even in young people. At certain times, you were about to stop, but once it's formed, and this is the progression of the allergy, and we've come to believe it ourselves, and they talk about it right here. And once having formed it and found they cannot break it, and once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, and then this is where they allude to the fact that how many times have you tried to be your own solution in regards to this, and then your problems pile up on you and become astonishingly difficult to solve. And then what I love is at the top again is that these chronic alcoholics, it's a repeat offender, and it's alluding to the mind now. It's explained that you can never safely use it, but you're going to continue to do it anyway, regardless of the consequences.
So they're getting into, like, you're trying to stop, now the people around you are getting involved in your life to help you to get you to stop. Why don't you finish that off, Joanna, with frothily?
Frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. The message which can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. In nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves, if they are to recreate their lives. If any feel that as psychiatrists directing a hospital for alcoholics we appear somewhat sentimental, let them stand with us in a while on the firing line. See the tragedies of the despairing wives, the little children. Let the solving of these problems become a part of their daily work, and even of their sleeping moments. And the most cynical will not wonder that we have accepted and encouraged this movement. We feel, after many years of experience, that we have found nothing which has contributed more to the rehabilitation of these men than the altruistic movement now growing up around them.
So they're talking about certain type of people here, certain types of alcoholics, that ordinary treatment and working on yourself and self-discovery and I'm working on me doesn't seem to work. And he's kind of witnessing this in his own facility here. If you working on you was enough to fix you, then Bill would have got this the first time he went to that treatment facility. He's kind of also re-emphasizing that Bill learned something upon his third treatment, which we understand now was his. We'll get into that story later in Bill's story, but he got some ideas that he put into practice and he recovered from the condition that was killed upon his third time in treatment. And he's kind of alluding, he's building into this thought here that the message that pulls these people back or recreates their life have to have depth and weight, has to be something other than themselves. And he talks about certain spiritual principles through the application, allows them to live a life beyond anything they could ever imagine. And now that he's going to clarify that with the problem that he's witnessed these people continuously seem to have, and he breaks it down to its simplest form. Men and women.
Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol.
Show of hands. Anybody need not explained? No. Okay.
If you need it explained, put it in the comments.
You know, that's funny. 30 years doing it. Every time I asked that question, I had one person. It was a nice little Al-Anon lady. Can you explain that, please?
Was it my mother?
Yeah, leave it alone. I'm not going there. Okay. The effect, right?
Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false.
Anybody? Right? You're having a drink and somebody's trying to do that emotional appeal or give you the look and you look at them like, what's your problem? Something happens in our mind when we're drinking that makes it sound normal. Then we want to get stopped. Anybody? I'm going to stop. I got the crew behind me. I'm going to solemn resolutions. I'm never going to do it again. Anybody do a resolution here? Never going to promise? Pass a lie detector's test? And you're going to stay sober forever, and then you find yourself drinking again, and it's like you never tried to get sober. Anybody have that experience here? And then every time you get sober, you think it's going to be different because you feel different. You learned your lesson. See, without realizing it, you're thinking it's a behavioral problem, not an illness, because you haven't been educated on what the difference is. So most people approach this as a behavioral problem. I'm working on me. I'm working on this. I'm working on that. Well, that explains the look on your face, right? So they're going to get into something other than us fixing us. And he witnesses this in his facility back in when? When was this written?
1939.
Yeah, and he witnesses in 1934. So pretty powerful stuff. And the reason it hasn't changed is because alcoholism hasn't changed. Hit us up, Joanne. Take us home.
To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented, unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks.
And a lot of us think we could see this process when it's happening. But when you're in that process, you're the only one that don't know it. You just know something ain't right, but you don't know what it is. And it's not like you go, oh boy, look, I'm irritable, restless, and discontent today. I think I'll have a drink. It's not that kind of thinking process. You just get to a state in your life where you just kind of like, you're just going along, and then all of a sudden you find yourself drinking again. Anybody like that here? You're going to go and you're never going to drink again. Like you go and it's like, no, I'm not drinking. And then you're drinking. And everybody goes, I thought you weren't drinking. You said, me too. So let's see what he says about this characteristic that we're the only ones unaware of. He's going to kind of try to give us a rough idea, which they're going to explain in great detail as we go along. Remember, this is an introduction to the conversation. It's a starting point. Like they need to work into it slowly with us because we're very skeptic when it comes to, like we always think there's a form of entrapment happening, eh? Anybody? So let's not quite commit yet. That's why there's 5 chapters to this thing before even making a decision, okay?
After they have succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, and the phenomenon of craving develops, they pass through the well-known stages of the spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again.
Any firm resolutions here? So then you hear people say that, I've hit bottom, I had enough, I had the gift of desperation. Well, that translates into the next paragraph. That gift of desperation isn't enough to create change. If it was enough to create change, then that's all there would be. Oh, I had a desperateness, I seen the light, I never drank again. Well, the doctor kind of goes to clarify, regardless of your story, it continues to be your story until something specific happens. And it's not something that you create through you, right? Because he's talking about this keeps on happening how often, Joanne? The desperate experimentation of the first drink.
This is repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery. So looking back, and we'll get into it with Bill's story, how many people felt desperateness in their life here before and was never going to do it again and felt the horrific shame, pain, and guilt? And you know what I mean? Like you're just crippled by what you've done and the existence that you're having. How many people has had that here? Show of hands. Right? And in that moment, you're never going to do it again. And you believe that, and you get people who believe it, and you would pass a lie detector's test. And then how many people found themselves doing it again? So that's interesting, right? So he says back in 1934, these people are having the same experience that some of you are having today, and it doesn't have to be that way anymore. The solution to this thing is not hitting bottom, but it helps get your attention. It's not all these conditions that we hear that I've surrendered, I got acceptance, I got this, I got that. He would have listed those things if that was enough to recover. If those were the key elements in recovery, he would have listed those things back in 1934 when he wrote this in 1939. Remember, he's a doctor working and specializing in alcoholism. He's the chief physician. He's witnessing, hey, you know what? These things that we've tried with these other people don't work with these types of people. And if you're this type of people, you're in trouble. But there's hope, right? There's hope. What's the hope part, Joanne? I'm getting excited here. I think I was new the way I'm going on. Okay, go ahead. On the other hand, and strange as this seems to those who do not understand, once a psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol. The only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules. So he hit some highlights. Joe, you around? Having technical problems? He's got himself muted. He might be on the phone. Okay, so what he's saying here, he witnessed
that these people underwent some form of change. We don't know what that is yet, but it's pretty strong the words he's using, that we're going to continue to build on these ideas. He's introducing new ideas to a conversation that they're going to build on and kind of expand on as we go along and give examples of. And he also talks about that once this change has happened, they're able to easily control their desire for alcohol. Meaning, when we read Bill's story, we've seen he was plagued with depression and that nearly drove him to drink. But based on his spiritual condition and based on truth, he was able to smash that idea. The obsession, he was able to smash that idea. But what we'll find out later is the insanity. So the obsession is a human problem. The insanity necessary to recover is a spiritual problem. It's a God problem or a psychic change problem. And the whole book will clarify that as we go along. This is where a lot of people's brains start going, Remember, we're looking for a new experience, and the book will back up all those ideas. We have a lot of other ideas where self could fix self based on self-knowledge. Don't we? How many people hear that in the meetings? The reason I drank is because, I wanted to, or I had a choice, or the choice came back. You hear people say stuff that's just not grounded on anything. Like, I have a choice today and stuff like that. Well, not if you're alcoholic, not if you're of this type. The doctor says the only thing that saves you from you is this psychic change and maintaining certain ideas. Are we saying that, or is the book saying that?
The book is saying that.
Okay, so let's read on, and he's going to give examples to what he's talking about, which gets really exciting here. Like, the more sober I get and get into this thing, the more excited I get, because I get to watch people who come along, like Joe, Joanne, and Carolyn, and all the other people, and Katie, which is a real miracle of mental health. Hello, Katie, if you're joining us. And all these people that we get to watch recreate their lives that the book talked about in the introduction of this thing is pretty remarkable stuff. All you people sitting here today looking for a new experience or had a new experience that continue to do this thing, it's exciting what's available here. Right? It's the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. Like, that's exciting stuff that anybody can have this. And when you watch people recreate their lives, it's pretty remarkable stuff, man. Anyway, sorry, I got a little excited there. Okay. Don't get me started.
You want to go through the examples that he has here?
Well, on the other hand, and then he kind of, this is so important, his observation and his experience with what's happening back then. And it's the same today, where a lot of people just read over this and kind of really don't see the depth and weight of what he's saying. When you get the grasp of what he's saying and the experience of these alcoholics that were without hope or without a solution back in the day, it kind of really adds depth and weight to what we're about to do. It's kind of like, wait a minute. People don't have to be dying of alcoholism in AA. We don't have to be sending people to other facilities to get help anymore. We could start helping them back when this thing was intended to do. We could start helping them the way it was meant to be, that they never have to worry about all that other stuff again. Anyways, on the other hand, unless you want to add something to that, Joe?
Yeah, and it goes back to XXVIII, just the previous page, and it goes down to that part where he says, if any feel that a psychiatrist directing a hospital for alcoholics, we appear somewhat sentimental and let them stand with us a while. Like, it's just pouring out of his heart. Like, come down, come see what we're trying to do. And he looks at us and he's like, man, you're back for the third time? Like, we got you straightened out mentally. We got you straightened out physically. We set you on your way. And then, shortly after, they're coming back again. And that's why they're like, they've started to see a revolutionary change in these individuals, men that were experiencing this over and over and over, men and women over and over and over again. And he witnessed the entire psychic change, but it was nothing that the doctor could produce. And that's why when he says here is that the most cynical will not wonder that we have accepted and encouraged this movement. We feel that after many years of experience that we have found nothing which has contributed more to the rehabilitation of these men than the altruistic movement now growing up. Like, coming from doctors, that's a lot of humility to say, we failed at producing this abstinence in you, and we've seen that these individuals have experienced something of the psyche, and they're recreating their lives as a result of it. And that's why, on the other hand, strange to say, it's so powerful, right?
Yeah.
And when you really look at it, it gives a little bit more of that depth and weight.
And it says your story doesn't have to be the same anymore. You can have a new story. That's what we're trying to have. A new experience and a new story. Like a lot of people come to the fellowship of A, especially if you've been in and out for a while, you have a back problem. I need this back, I need that back. You get it back, and then you're coming back. You miss the whole focus, right? Most people are job-oriented, girlfriend, relationships, all these other things become the primary objective in their life. They get those things, they've mistaken that for recovery because alcoholism is still lying dormant, and then the insanity returns, which we'll talk about later. But on the other hand, Joanne, light us up.
I've already read this part.
Okay, so men and women. Yeah. Okay, go with men and women. He's talking about his experience of witnessing this thing. Now he's going to talk about the experience with these men and women in his facility.
Men have cried out to me? Is that where you want me to go?
Oh, no. Oh, I thought you meant, yeah, I imagine, but I mean in the book. We're sticking with the book, Joanne.
It's not that kind of meeting.
It's not that kind of meeting.
Okay, kids.
Joanne, give me my wallet back. No, sorry.
No.
Go ahead, no. Okay.
Men have cried out to me in sincere and despairing appeal. Doctor, I cannot go on like this. I have everything to live for. I must stop, but I cannot. You must help me. Faced with this problem, if a doctor is honest with himself, he must sometimes feel his own inadequacy. Although he gives all that it is in him, it often is not enough. One feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. And
that would cover the facilities nowadays that are very helpful, but it's not our solution to alcoholism. People go, I've been to treatment, I've been here, I've done that, I got counseling, got group therapy. I do all these other things which are available back then with these people. But they don't spell the necessary change to recover, and they're coming in with the idea that I've done this thing. No, you've done their thing. You haven't done our thing. You haven't done this. If you've done this, you'd be having a different experience. What makes you say that? Well, you'd be exhibiting different characteristics than the characteristics you're exhibiting, right? And we'll get into that later. It's just like when we get into Bill's story, it's something really remarkable. The first half of Bill's story talks about our struggles as being a newcomer, trying to find a solution and not being able to find it. And then he talks about finding a solution and what his life looked like, which is really wild. And you can't hide those characteristics. And we're going to get into a bit of that here. Go ahead.
Though the aggregate of recoveries resulting from psychiatric effort is considerable, we physicians must admit we have made little impression upon the problem as a whole. Many types do not respond to the ordinary psychological approach. I do not hold with those who believe that alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control.
Oh, how many people were hoping that we could do a psychological approach to this thing? Just talk to yourself.
It bears mentioning that a good portion of the fellowship are actually approaching their problem that way. That it's just a matter of exerting their own mental control. And then they're baffled when they drink again.
Yeah, I'm working on me with me. What's your solution to you, me? I'm applying more me to me. Well, what happens when you apply more me to me? Well, I get thirsty. Go ahead. Meetings makers make it to the next drink. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, don't get me started.
I have had many men who had, for example, worked a period of months on some problem or business deal with which was to be settled on a certain date favorably to them. They took a drink a day or so prior to the date, and then the phenomenon of craving at once became paramount to all other interests.
So we'll stop right there for a second. So they're using certain terminology in regards to our first symptom now. They talk about the allergy. And then once these people have a drink, it triggers the phenomenon of craving. They're very specific. And what symptom is that in association with? The first symptom or the second symptom in alcoholism?
It's the first symptom.
Yeah, so if you don't have this symptom or characteristic, it doesn't matter then, does it?
No, because you can drink normally.
Yeah, and how many people were hoping they didn't have this characteristic? Nobody in this group, right? Okay, go ahead.
These men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control. There are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving, which cause men to make the supreme sacrifice rather than continue the fight.
What does that mean?
There are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving, which cause men. It means that it's not a matter of just being able to think your way out of the physical craving. Your intentions may have been to have 1 or 2 drinks with dinner, but it's not a matter of mental control anymore. Something physical has taken over.
Yeah, anybody miss important dates or engagements? Promise? You have, like, you know, like, I went out with this, like, I didn't understand this symptom. And even if I understood it, wouldn't have changed anything. But it kind of, I was going to meet one of my girlfriend way back in the day. I was going to go meet her parents on Sunday. And so I said, I'll just drink Friday night. And I won't drink Saturday. And so I ended up running into a couple friends, you know, and I have to be social. So I'm drinking with them. We got into a card game. It lasted till 5 a.m. And we ended up doing some party favors because I got to be polite. I don't usually do that kind of stuff, but they offered. So that kept me up a little longer than I anticipated. And so I had to go meet her parents at 12. So I went to meet her parents at 12. And I'm thinking to myself, I did a couple bumps, and I said, you know, I'm going to be all right. I said to myself, Self, you seem to be doing all right. Anybody ever have those conversations with Self? You don't seem too drunk. Just don't say much. Just sit there and be kind of cool. So I went and met her parents at the restaurant town, like a little pub. And I was sitting there, and I'm talking. I said, you're doing good, Tony. Nobody knows, man. You're doing okay. You're doing great. And they're talking. I'm nodding my head. I'm smiling. I'm on a 3-day drunk, right? And she's looking at me kind of weird, but I'm pulling it off, right? I'm pulling. And then I went to put my elbow on the table, and I missed the table. She says, I want to talk to you right now. She says, you're an alcoholic. I never want to see you again. It just crushed me. And then I started crying. Not because she never wanted to see me again. It's because she called me an alcoholic. Now 2 of us knew, right? She was so insensitive. Right? I don't even remember her name, but I remember that moment when she called me out. Anybody have those moments? Right? Anybody going to go to the Christmas party or family party or birthday party and then you missed or a court date? Anybody not only going to have a couple and not drive and now I have to drive because I had more than a couple? Okay, good. The phenomenon of craving. Okay.
Do you want to go through the classification of alcoholics?
No, let's go all the, because this is, but you could read that on your own. A lot of people get into thinking these are the they're the characteristic of the alcoholic. They don't make you an alcoholic. So there's a big difference. Like you could have all these characteristics and not be an alcoholic. Anybody agree with that? So they're saying these are not the things that kind of, we're all different personalities in the fellows, but there's only one thing that makes you alcoholic. There's only one thing, and it's not my behaviors, right? It's not the consequences. Because I've never had an impaired driving charge. Have I ever driven impaired? I've never really driven sober. Right? So, you know what I mean? Like, I've never, like, this, like, have I had consequences? Yes, that's what I thought made me an alcoholic was the consequences. Anybody there? How many people thought that? If I could just drink without consequence, then I won't be an alcoholic. So you hear everybody coming in. The reason they're here is because of the consequence. I'm not here because of my drinking. How many new people do you know that's in AA because of their drinking? No, I'm here because of the consequences. How many people came to AA because of the consequences? Oh, I'm going to AA because I drink. No, I'm going to AA because I have a consequence problem and I can't get out of it. There's no other alternative. This is the last card to play here. I'm going to AA. Right? So, men and women, all these
and many others have one symptom in common.
Wait. What is that symptom, everybody? What's this one symptom that we all have in common?
Yeah, put it in the chats.
So it's interesting because if you sit at a lot of meetings, you get really confused what the one thing is that we're all the same about. Because you hear people say, oh, I do this because I'm so alcoholic. Well, what did you do? Oh, I went and bought this, or I went here. I'm so alcoholic. I did this because I'm alcoholic. Anybody ever hear that terminology and those kind of classifications? My behavior is associated because I'm an alcoholic. That's why I do these things, right? Well, you need to establish what makes you alcoholic, right? And it's only in doing those things. Sorry, go ahead.
Those of you who are you're getting through to them, Tony. Those of you who are stating in the chat that the allergy is the correct answer to the question are correct. Those of you who are using the words obsession, spiritual problem, spiritual issue, you're confused as to what we're talking about. So just to be clear, where we're at right now is in the first symptom of alcoholism, in the doctor's opinion on page XXX. And what we're covering right now is the physical aspect of the disease.
So if you back that up, which is really cool, like I spent 11 years in and out of the fellowship, those were the answers, the catchphrase answers I was giving before, because that's what I gathered in the fellowship. Most of us, we learn to go through and assess things. We do things on the run or on the fly. We go in, we assess the room, we gather information, we become a chameleon, we gather on terminologies, or just like we kind of blend in, right? We're used to figuring stuff out as we go along. We're not used to reading things to figure it out. We figure things out based on survival, based on necessity, based on having to. Anybody like that here? So you come into the fellowship and you try to do the same thing, and it's not working because most of the people are doing the same thing. So I was gathering my information from these people. And so when George asked me these questions, what we asked it, I was giving a lot of those same answers. And so what George said to me was, okay, good. Could you show me so far where you could back up your answer in what we've done so far? And I kind of went, whoa, that was different because I've never been taken through the book before. So none of my answers were book-based. So now that I've gone through the book, and most people who have gone through the book, the answer is book-based. What is the first symptom in alcoholism? Well, it's the allergy. Where do you get that information from? We've just covered it, right? And it was the introduction to that idea when they said a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. So what's the first symptom we're covering is the body. And we're touchstoning on why people can't stay sober is because this thing that happens in their mind, a little maladjusted, this desire, but they haven't really got in depth with the second part of our illness because they really need to get our attention with the first part. Because if you don't understand the first part, then there's no use in talking about the second part. A lot of people talk about their behaviors or their unmanageability. That's not what they're talking about, because is like Joe mentioned earlier, you could understand all those things and try not to do those things, but those things are not what makes you alcoholic. So what is the one symptom that makes you alcoholic?
Let's find out what the book says. So those of you who are asking in the chat right now what the difference between the word allergy and the phenomenon of craving is, we're about to tell you right out of the book.
Yep.
All these and many others have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. This phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy, which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been, by any treatment with which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence.
Why is that?
Because there's no cure for the physical aspect of alcoholism.
So phenomenon, is that singular or plural?
Singular.
Singular. So they're saying there's a singular thing that's really unexplainable, but we're going to try to explain it in the best way we know how that makes the sense to most of us. So we're going to say, well, if the percentage of people have a normal reaction to alcohol, and we're having an abnormal reaction to alcohol, you need to know what a normal reaction is. And what's an abnormal reaction? So when we start talking about what an abnormal reaction is, we talk about that thirst. Anybody get thirstier here when they drink? They're more concerned with the next drink before they're finished the first drink. Anybody concerned with other people's amounts, how they drink, how much they drink? Anybody remember that guy that comes to the party with a 6-pack? And he's doing his 7 trip to the fridge? He's got to go. How many people invited that guy back to the party the following week? Right? Yeah. So, so it's kind of like, and the guy that shows up with a 24 and a 24 beer and a 40 ouncer and he's alone, best friend, eh? How many people like that kind of guy? How many people like the guy that has 2 beer and go home to his family? How many people like the people that sit there with you and don't mention the family they got to go home to and keep drinking till last call? So now we see, the phenomenon of craving. Nothing is more important than living in the moment and having another drink. Anybody? Anybody remember? I'm just going to have one because I got to do the groceries. I got to mow the lawn. I got to pay the rent. I got the rent in one pocket. I got my drinking money in the other pocket. I'm not going to get them mixed up. Anybody? right? And then you have a couple drinks, you forget about the lawn, you forget about the rent, you forget about everything. And then it's last call and you're staggering out of the bar. Anybody remember last call, trying to get all the beer and all the stuff off the table? You think everybody's trying to get the booze out of the... How many people have been there? Show of hands. Last call, you're trying to get, how do I get the booze out of the bar that I paid for? You've ordered more than enough, and you think everybody's clinking and clanking when they leave the bar.
That's
Anybody?
why some of us ladies carry such big purses.
I love you ladies with big purses. Guys are awesome. Here, hold my gun. No, keep going.
That's a whole other meeting.
Oh, sorry.
So what they're saying here at the base of this paragraph is that the only solution they have to offer or they've ever come across is abstinence. So wouldn't that be the entire program? Just don't take the first drink. That's it. That's the end of it. I'm asking you, Tony.
Yeah, well, how many people have been told that? Just don't take the first one. How many people have been told that?
Put the plug in the jug.
Just,
right?
You picked up because you want to. You haven't learned your lesson. You haven't done step one. There's always an excuse why people drink again. You ever notice that? And the excuse the doctor talks about is because there's something in their mind, and until they experience an entire psychic change, what are they going to continue to do? Okay, so everybody write that down. So unless this type of person has experienced an entire psychic change, what are they going to continue to do? What are you getting, Joe?
Everybody's saying drink.
So, what's the step one promise?
Drinking.
You're going to continue to drink. But that's not the impression the fellowship gives you. The impression the fellowship gives you, once you do step one, you should be able to stay sober. If you're able to stay sober by surrendering in step one, or having acceptance in step one, or just bringing it to a meeting, or then you wouldn't need the rest of the solution. Then you wouldn't need a psychic change if you were able to stay sober based on experience. And none of us would have had to experience the humiliation of taking another drink. Because this is repeated how often? Over and over. How many people has experienced over and over here? How many people have experienced periods of sobriety only to find themselves drinking again? How many people said never again? If you were able to keep yourself sober, then you wouldn't have come to AA or ended up in treatment. There's something going on beyond your ability to understand, and that's what we need to understand. Because if I don't understand what this problem is I'm up against, then any solution will make sense. But if I understand what I'm up against, and if I was sitting with this doctor, he says, you're the type that only seems to need a psychic change or a spiritual experience because you can't keep yourself sober based on your own self-knowledge. Because the solution to the physical allergy is not taking that first drink, right? Are we agreed on that? So how many people have been able to keep themselves sober based on the idea that they can't control their drinking or not take the first drink? So we see the reason that isn't the solution to alcoholism, it's the solution to the allergy. Because if I don't put it in my system, then I won't trigger the phenomenon of craving. We all good on that? Give me a show of hands, people. We all good on that? So if this person continues to drink, is the problem in their body or is there something going on in their mind? So there's something going on up here that's what we treat. We treat that with the steps. We treat the solution. We don't treat alcoholism. We have a solution for alcoholism. Is there a big difference between treating alcoholism and having a solution for alcoholism? Huge difference. What most people try to do is treat alcoholism. Well, how can you treat an illness? If you're trying to treat alcoholism, you're looking at it as a behavioral problem. Then you don't need a psychic change. What you need to do is learn your lesson. How many people have been told that here? You just need to learn frothy emotional appeal. Sit down and have the talk. Let's have the talk. Well, what seems to be the nature of your malfunction? That's a good question, isn't it? How many people here has looked in the mirror and asked yourself, what's the matter with you? You ever wonder who's asking that question? What's the matter with you? I don't know. I was hoping you could answer that. And you're talking to yourself in the mirror, right? And you're getting, anyways, let's move on. Let's go to some examples of what the doctor's talking about here. Okay.
About a year, over on page XXI, it says about 1 year prior to this experience, a man was brought in to be treated from chronic alcoholism. He had partially recovered from.
Can we back up a second, please?
Sure.
On page 30, this immediately, right?
That's not backing up. That's shooting forward to page 30.
Where are you?
I'm in the doctor's opinion.
That's right. So am I. No, Roman numeral XXX. Right? Roman numeral 30. Where they talk about all these, start right there. All these and many others. We'll recap that. You got that?
All these. You ready?
Yep.
All these and many others have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving.
We're all good with that, right?
Well, this phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy. So it's an unexplainable event that physically causes us to drink, become more thirsty when we drink, or to drink more than we intend to.
We all good with that? Just show of hands. We all good? Okay.
When they use the word allergy, they're just alluding to the fact that it's an abnormal reaction to alcohol. Normal people do not experience this when drinking alcohol.
Does that make sense? Because I can't see you guys. If you give me a nod or a show of hands, we can all participate. Right on. Okay? Okay.
Which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been, by any treatment with which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. This immediately precipitates us into a seething cauldron of debate. Much has been written pro and con, but among physicians, the general opinion seems to be that most chronic alcoholics are doomed.
That's not good news, is it? Anybody think that's good news? Show of hands? No? Okay. Let's skip over that part. Okay, sorry.
What is the solution? Perhaps I can best answer this by relating one of my experiences. About 1 year prior to this experience, a man was brought in to be treated for chronic alcoholism. He had but partially recovered from a gastric hemorrhage and seemed to be a case of pathological and mental deterioration. He had lost everything worthwhile in life and was only living, one might say, to drink. He frankly admitted and believed that for him there was no hope.
How many people have been there? Tried everything that you had at your own disposal, been to meetings. Joe's experience is the same way. Joanne's experience is the same way. Mine is experienced the same way, 11 years in and out. Then I got 12-step. I believe that was beyond human aid, and that I was just, AA was just going to prolong my life. Is this guy in the same boat? Pretty hopeless condition here?
Following the elimination of alcohol, there was found to be no permanent brain injury.
I had the same thing. Sorry.
We could have a debate about that. Okay. He accepted the plan outlined in this book. 1 year later, he called to see me, and I experienced a very strange sensation.
So what's the difference here? What's the transition and the differences? What's the key factor in the change of his story?
That he accepted the plan outlined in this book.
So he went through a process, right? Does that kind of make sense? So this alludes to a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body and the solution they found. They're making reference to that thing now, and we're just in the doctor's opinion. So you hear a lot of people say, oh, the first half just talks about step one. Actually, no, it talks about the problem, the solution, and the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous, all the way right from the beginning. As soon as you receive this book, it talks about the potential of the miracle that's available to anybody suffering from alcoholism. It's pretty wild stuff. Let's see what happens to this guy.
I knew the man by name, and I partly recognized his features. But there all resemblance ended. From a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck had emerged a man brimming over with self-reliance and contentment. I talked with him for some time, but was not able to bring myself to feel that I had known him before. To me, he was a stranger, and so he left me. A long time has passed with no return to alcohol.
How many people would like that experience? Where the people of your past run into you again and they can't recollect knowing you. That there's something drastically different about you. There's something pretty remarkable about what's happening in your life. You're not the same person. It's like you were a twin of yourself. How many people would like that experience? Or had that experience? Pretty wild, eh? Okay.
When I need a mental uplift, I often think of another case brought in by a physician prominent in New York. The patient had made his own diagnosis and, deciding his situation hopeless, had hidden in a deserted barn, determined to die.
Okay, let's stop there. Now, that's fun. When you think about that, how many people have been exceptionally drunk here? Show of hands. Exceptionally drunk. So imagine this guy. He's at a party. He's going to go hide in the barn. But of course he wants everybody to know where he is, right? He's drunk. And these guys are looking for him. You could hear him in the barn. Don't look over here. A search party went looking for this guy. Like, how many people like the dramatics? Anybody been to that kind of drunk? This guy's one of us, eh? So the search party, they got their lanterns and all this. He's in the barn going, nobody loves me. Anybody been there? Nobody loves me. Everybody's having a great time. And he's got to make the whole party about his escapade. Anybody been there?
What, 2 a.m. drunk dialing people?
Yeah. So
they can enjoy your pity party as well as you.
So how's he going to feel when he wakes up in the morning?
Not great.
Okay, go ahead. Joe, where are you at, Joe? Okay.
He's muted himself. He might be on the phone.
Okay.
He was rescued by a searching party and, in desperate condition, brought to me. Following his physical rehabilitation, he had a talk with me in which he frankly stated he thought the treatment a waste of effort. Unless I could assure him, which no one ever had, that in the future he would have the willpower to resist the impulse to drink. His alcoholic problem was so complex and his depression so great that we felt his only hope would be through what we then called moral psychology. And we doubted if even that would have any effect. However, he did become sold on the ideas contained in this book.
So what do these two people have in common so far?
That they became sold on the ideas in this book.
And they both had the problem of alcoholism, right? One had grave mental and emotional disorders. That's why we have Joanne here as an example of this guy here, right in the book. And I'm more of the other guy, like, seemed reasonably normal in every aspect, right? Sure. We don't need a show of hands here. People, put your hands down, right? I'm kind of sensitive, right? So we see the examples here. So it doesn't matter that this guy has problem other than alcoholism. He has alcoholism, and the other, they're both desperate. They've both tried everything to quit, and they found they weren't able to do so. So now they're having a conversation, which would be then with the doctor, or we would have with a newcomer, based on our experience of having gone through this, that there's a solution to this. And he's kind of saying, you know what? Based on the idea, or based on the experience, or based on kind of exhibiting these things, these both people became sold on the idea. And they both had the same experience. That's pretty cool, right? How many people think that's pretty cool? So that means this experience is available to anybody who has this condition. And what's that experience entail? Want to lay that up on us?
He has not had a drink for a great many years. I see him now and then, and he is a fine specimen of manhood as one could wish to meet. I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book. Read this book through, and though perhaps he came to scoff, he may remain to pray. William D. Silkworth, M.D.
So, hey, Joe, well, gone again. I was just going to ask him a question. That's typical of Joe. Here he is gone. Let's do a list. We got 218 people. Honestly, let's have an honest moment, right? You could show hands, or you could put yes. How many people, when they were new or came to the fellowship or to date, have read this book through and through?
I have.
Now, on their own, how many people read this through the direction of another human being? How many people would have seen the need to do this coming to the fellowship of AA nowadays? Because we hear a lot of other things other than what's outlined in here. Anybody been to topic meetings? How many people hear this as a solution to their dilemma? How many people hear when at topic meetings how they're the solution to their dilemma by applying more self to self? What's your experience, Joe? Where you been?
Just enjoying the show.
Did you hear any of that?
What's my experience been?
In regards to, well, these guys are trying to fix self with self. And we talked about how these two became sold on the idea. So the first part of it was they concluded that they were alcoholic of the hopeless variety, meaning not being able to get themselves sober based on their own experience. Inevitably, they found themselves drinking again. Hypothetically, say a year, 2 years, 3 months, 6 weeks, the next day, they've always found themselves revisiting that drink, and they're baffled at the idea of why that is. Both of them became sold on the presentation of an idea to their solution to alcoholism, applied this to their life, and had the change that they talked about to the point where the doctor hardly recognized them or where they were able to recreate their lives. So the first part is self-working on self, which we hear a lot of, that guys like me, yourself, and Joanne got taught for years until we got 12-stepped, and then what our experience was having gone through this. So did you read this book before somebody instructed you to do it, or you just gradually kind of went right at it?
I didn't even want to read this book. Like, I've been in and out of the rooms 15 years, and this book's been presented to me 3 times in the last 15 years, and I've met thousands and thousands of alcoholics in the rooms, and only 3 gentlemen came up to me and offered me the solution in the book. One was a guy named Pat. He offered it to me when I was 17 years old when I came in, and at that time I didn't see the hopeless state of my condition, right? I still had no desire to stop, and he invited it into my life. And then 7 years after that, another gentleman came over to my house, attempted to read it with me, but I still had not, tasted that nip of the ringer, that that hopelessness, that inability to leave it alone, right? So when it finally came to the end all, it was at a point where I've lost the power to choose whether I was going to do it again, right? And many attempts, like we read in the very beginning of the doctor's opinion, Bill in and out, multiple times, but he goes upon his 3rd treatment here, and I was hopeless. I was hopeless until somebody had invited this into, until I was willing to see. Like, it really came to that. I had a desire to stop doing what I was doing, and this is that second symptom that we're talking about. And it's like, throughout my 15 years, there was great, enormous, things that had happened that would, cause one to stop, and I'm not going to get too much into that, but, at the end of the day, what it came down to this time was I couldn't leave it alone no matter how much I wanted to. Like, for my own personal, it wasn't for any frothy emotional pill, it wasn't for the appeal of my son or my family, it was just because I seen that I couldn't stop. The fridge was always stocked, the freezer was always stocked, the bag for work was always stocked, the car was always stocked, and it was just, and I'm just like, what happened here? How did we get to this level? And so I got presented this book at that time, and I was shown these symptoms, and right away that matched everything. I never heard it before, the way it's described here. Yes, it was presented to me, but I never heard it until now, 2 years.
And then when you got sold on the idea of going through this, how long are you sober now?
Over 2 years.
Awesome. You're doing fantastic. Joanne, what's your experience with that?
Well, I knew everything. See, I was one of those types that came to AA because I was.
I'll put up my hand for that one. I'm a witness to that. How many people been there? You don't need to tell us. Can I have an opportunity to share on my profound knowledge of something I haven't done yet? How many people?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And anybody that attempted to try and help me was just met by indignant behavior. I was rude. I wore many faces in the rooms of AA. Sometimes I was desperate. Sometimes I was, I figured I knew everything. I was a chameleon. I could walk into a meeting and give a very profound talk. I've been a used car salesman for most of my adult life. So I have a unique knack for making, incorrect information sound really plausible.
A show of hands.
Yeah. Like I had people shaking my hands on my way out of a meeting, telling me how great my share was. And then 10 minutes later, I was walking into a bar. It took me a long time to recognize just how baffled I was about my own situation. When they say that the alcoholic life seems the only normal one, I connect with that at a really deep level. And I often would get confused even sometimes now today that a lot of that thinking came out of the way I was raised. I was raised in an alcoholic home. The alcoholics in my family outnumber the non-alcoholics in my family. I just thought the way I was behaving and the things that I was experiencing were completely normal. And anybody that tried to explain it to me as being abnormal, my mind closed off to the idea. It wasn't until the consequences became so bad that even I couldn't deny them anymore. And I would love to tell you all that when the consequences became so bad that I hit rock bottom, as we quite often like to refer it to, that was the turning point. That was the jumping off point. I suddenly was able to hear the explanations and I was able to connect with people who were trying to help me. But it got much worse. Because after I had suffered what we would probably refer to as a rock bottom, I started drinking for the sickest reasons of all. I wanted to drink because I just didn't want to exist. It wasn't a case of just partying too much. It wasn't a case of just, not being able to sort of mentally wrap my head around it. I did not want to exist inside my own skin anymore. And the only way I could feel any kind of relief from self was to get drunk. And any time I tried to keep myself sober and I tried to spend periods of time without drinking, I would sit in meetings and I would listen to people go on about how grateful they were and how wonderful life was. And I wanted to kill myself. Because if I had to feel this way, I would rather be drunk. And I didn't feel like I could share that with anybody inside the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, because it felt like we needed to come to a meeting and you needed to be upbeat and you couldn't possibly share with somebody that you were experiencing difficulty staying sober. I mean, it was just, unheard of to share that in Alcoholics Anonymous. It wasn't until I met somebody that actually explained to me that the program of AA, not the fellowship, but the program of AA, was actually designed specifically for people like me. It was designed specifically to help people who cannot keep themselves sober, based on what they tell themselves. And that what I had been suffering from were these symptoms. And what my real problem beyond the symptoms was that I lacked the power to create the change sufficient enough to bring about recovery from something that was killing me. But the good news was that there was a program of action I could go through, and I could make a connection with a power greater than myself, and it would solve the problem. And I have been sober for a little over 5.5 years. And for somebody who couldn't draw a sober breath, couldn't go 24 hours without taking a drink, I choke on those words. The fact that I've been sober that long is still baffling to me now. But I am truly grateful for it. I'm truly grateful for this big book study. It saved my life.
So, and that's kind of like all our stories, right? We were kind of baffled at what was happening. We come to the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is the only solution we endorse. This is the solution that we apply to ourselves, that get relief. Like, there's abstinence, and abstinence is not enough for people like us, because there's something that happens within our being that we become more crazy as time goes on. I don't know, anybody practice abstinence here and become more crazy, and you try to act normal, you're on the wrong side of crazy, and you're like just nuts, and you go to a meeting, I'm surrendering, I'm letting it go, and meanwhile at home, you kick the cat through the screen like you're just nuts. And anybody found they got more crazy when they got sober here? Any show of hands? Anybody still on the wrong side of crazy here? This is about getting you on the right side of crazy and enjoying it, where it doesn't work towards your demise. It's a life beyond anything you could ever imagine. When they actually, next time you read the promises, look at what it's saying. You'll be amazed. You'll be amazed, not halfway thrilled or just surviving or just trying to get through or just dealing with life on life's terms. Like, there's something here that places you beyond anything you could ever imagine. And Joanne, did you want to talk about the seventh tradition for a second?
Sure. Guys, just at the beginning of the meeting, Kimberly, I know we got to wrap this up, but just very quickly, I know that, that a lot of our meetings are not being able to physically convene at this time, and there's a lot of questions and concerns about how to best practice the seventh tradition. We're currently experiencing an unprecedented situation all around the world, but not just locally in our own area, but globally as a Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. For the first time in our 85-year history, our fellowship is unable to pass the physical basket. We're working on a way to safely and responsibly pass a digital basket in this meeting, and we'll probably roll that out next week. But in the meantime, if you are a concerned and responsible AA member, and if you're looking for ways to still contribute to the fellowship to make sure that the lights stay on and literature keeps rolling and 12-step calls keep going, reach out in your local area, find out what your home groups are doing, find out what your local intergroup office is doing. I've posted in the chat a link to the AA.org website that takes you right to the contribution screen so that you can send contributions directly to the General Service Office in New York. I've also posted the sheets in the chat. I've also posted our Big Book Study Workshop email address. So if you have questions or concerns about Seventh Tradition, about the worksheets, about our Facebook page, or want to get connected to our YouTube channel, feel free to send me a request there, and we'll get back to you tonight after the meeting. Thank you.
And Joe, you want to wrap up? You got us muted there. Joe, you want to wrap up where they can find the talks and get more involved real fast?
I'll wrap it up quick. I posted, and I'll post again right now, the YouTube channel, and this will enable you to go look at the playlists. We have a playlist where it's an 11-hour playlist, and it takes you through the sheets. And in the About section on the YouTube channel is where you can get the PDF sheets. You can get them through our link in our email. And if you want, you can friend us, and we can get you on a Big Book discussion page.
And Kimberly, thank you so much. You're an angel.
Thank you, Kimberly.
God's light working in. And thank you all for allowing us to be with you tonight. And we'll meet again Tuesday. And we'll close with one of the greatest prayers I've ever heard. If you don't mind, we'll do it together alone in our presence, but we'll do it together in spirit. We'll close with the Serenity Prayer. Who's Father? I mean, what makes this all possible? God.
God.
Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. May the Force be with you.
Thank you so much, guys. Another amazing meeting. For those of you on, we are going to leave the meeting open for